There we go. All right, left, right, out again. Talk a little bit more about what's going on in the world, some ramifications. I meant, I keep meaning to write things down so I don't get off into tangents, but I felt to do that again because I was working out and just got busy. But I, pull up my tactical map here of the battle space over Ukraine just to look at what's going on. And this is updated from yesterday. And it looks like I'm going to just go over this real quick. So the forces from Crimea are making inroads and they're about to connect with the Donetsk area, that front of the Battle of the Donetsk and Luhansk, Donbass region offensive. And that could happen within a day or two. I know the Russians, like they had pretty much a tactical pause during a period of time during the talks, I believe. Um, and Zelensky, like he asserted that probably not going to see anything out of it, and it doesn't look like anything did. And in fact, I believe right when it was done, they were shelling. They commenced fire, and started prepping their next move from the northern front. So you have like a northwest eastern front where that's Kharkiv and the like. And that right now there's a huge push above Kharkiv that looks like that's going to like almost pincer Kiev. They're going to come in from the east. Then you have from the north, and here's some other. These are interesting, scuttlebutt that's going around that the Belarusian army might join the fight. I know they've also done some interesting things to their constitution, like lifting the non-nuclear status. Presumably, the only reason you do that is so that you could maybe house nuclear weapons of sort. Or in this current state, it's not like you're going to go build a nuclear power plant or something. It's in the middle of a war. And so when you do that kind of action, you can only assume, I mean, it's logical to assume that next course of events, right? So you got them coming from the north. Here's the thing, and I'm going to, summarize that real quick. So you got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 efforts, really. And I believe the main effort now has tactically switched to the Kiev for the Russians. And initially, our thoughts was the main effort's going to be from the east, and maybe it was, but you can always change your plans as the battle as it unfolds. Always tactically minded, tactical reset, or if you want to use that terminology. But anyway, so they it looks to me it looks like the main effort is to sack Kiev because I believe they want to take the capital. And I don't know if, in my humble opinion, which I have been wrong a little bit on this, in a sense, I think that the administration in the West has kind of lent themselves to allowing Putin just to go ahead and just take this instead of just taking the Donbass region. And this thing always in my face. But however, if I was Putin, there is a geographic regions in Ukraine, and there's some huge reservoirs and river systems here that you can actually create a new border on the east, and still do what he's saying is get out of Ukraine by just basically conquering the eastern part of Ukraine, Kiev down to maybe east of Odessa, perhaps Odessa. I mean, I'd imagine they would go down towards the Crimea in a diagonal fashion and create a border that way. I think there's some lakes and rivers that are there. They would make natural borders and then allow Ukrainians themselves to still have a country in the West. I'm thinking about in states here because I don't think the Ukrainians really have a chance in this because we're just seeing the tip of the iceberg in these efforts from Russia. And whether you like them or not, it seems as though they've done some things a little different than we expect tactically. Like if you're there bent on destroying the enemy and really causing them to or breaking their will and breaking their ability to do certain things, you would have destroyed a lot of the airfields, which they did, but they also tried to take them. You would destroy a lot of the facilities that they've actually tried to take. And I believe that the case is that, on the eastern front of Ukraine, if you go east on the eastern part, that's mainly Russian. There's a lot of huge Russian population there. And my contention is, I've seen a lot of guys I really respect and they've said that this is going to be like a Vietnam for them. I doubt it. See, here's the reason why. Let me explain this. So, once I would say yes, to that if they wanted to take all of Ukraine, right? However, if he stays to the eastern side of Kiev and to the east, I don't think he'll be in a Vietnam. I think, yeah, the transition could be rocky, but they will envelop that and set up whatever states they have to for governing mechanisms. If they decide to go west, like let's go Lunsk or Lviv or any of those towns that are closer to Poland, where they're more ethnically Ukrainian, or if you want to, I mean, they all look kind of, they all look similar, European or whatnot, but they identify as Ukrainians. They speak Ukrainian language. Their history is that those people over there hate Putin. All right, that is where you're going to get into that kind of Vietnam-esque style warfare. That it would be a little more contentious. I don't think they're that stupid. I think they realize that. So I don't see them actually taking over all of Ukraine. They're carving Ukraine in half, in my opinion. Just using common sense here, because you don't want to get bogged down in an event like that. So you want to stay out of that western part. You might hit them with some ordnance to kind of keep things honest, right? Give yourself a little bit of space, a little bit a gap there, and kind of showing a little bit that you can target over there. But the other thing is, so if we look at the West attempt to shore up Ukrainian military aspirations or whatever through aid, and now we have people there wanting to go over there, veterans. I would like to go over there myself. It seems like it's a big hassle to do that, mainly for humanitarian reasons, to get women and children out. I mean, I have some experience over there, and I would love to do that. It seems like it's not as easy, and by the time you actually get approved to do so, the battle space has already changed. And so for my purposes, I'd like to tell people, hey, if you're in Kiev or whatever, you need to get women and children out of there as soon as possible. If you're Ukrainian especially, I'm sure if you're Russian and you're more sympathetic to this, then I guess you're okay, but you need to get out of there. But what was I getting at? Oh, so the Russians aren't stupid. The West seems to be very stupid. They've telegraphed their moves. We're going to give aid. We're going to bring military assets in there, or we're going to give them, not necessarily operate them, because we're scared of having an actual conflict. I know there's politicians over here that are wanting a no-fly zone, which my sympathies to the military there. Yes, actually that would tactically benefit them, and you might be able to push it. But what that is escalating the event, right? You're now going to be in a shooting war with people and phones, right? You'll now be in air-to-air combat with Russian assets, and potentially escalating into a larger battle, right, or war. So what has happened is, I know a number of nations have said that they were going to give air assets. Which, here's the thing: the Ukrainian Air Force uses Soviet-style aircraft. So, I mean, I know there's no spool up. I don't know how many of those pilots actually know how to operate like an F-16 or whatever we're giving them. But two, and maybe they can be spooled up real quick. I mean, it's war, so you might have to cut a few corners on the old training, all right, and get people in the battlefield. But two, all right, if I'm in, we're supposedly going to give them arms, Javelin, Stinger, type anti-tank and anti-air assets, and then also small arms and ammunition, right? And they want to get it into Kiev, because that's pretty much the pivotal battle that's going on here. If Kiev falls, then what's next, right? So that's what it seems like. Zelensky's put that line in the sand. I mean, I don't think he's actually said it, but that's kind of like a big deal, being, the capital. It seems like that'd be the pivotal momentum changer in this for the Ukrainians, if they can really hold out and solidify that. But here's the deal. So if you are Putin, if you are the Russian commanders, obviously you're not going to just let this happen. You control the airspace. I know that recently, I think as of today, their air ops have really, stepped up after the talks. So I believe what they are trying to do is really solidify their air supremacy, and in order to, one, cut off any kind of logistic support that we can give the Ukrainians, we as of the West. But then also they would have to encircle Kiev militarily, coordinate, and in order to cut any kind of logistical support that we could give them. And that was my first thoughts when the West came out and said, hey, we're going to do this. It's like, okay, well, how are you going to do this? You say you are, and you've given away your intent right there. And there's only a few avenues of really approach to be able to do that, a few avenues to do that, to get it into the battlefield. The only thing I can think of from the Western's perspective is utilizing, well, I don't know about small arms, all right? I don't know how you get those over there because you can choke off the city pretty easy. That's why I say get people out now. If I was Zelensky, this is the other thing. So let's take it. Okay, well, let me do this and I'll get into this other sidebar. You can utilize airports out of Lviv. You can utilize some of these other airports in these smaller towns in the west to fly to conduct air operations. I think that's why you're seeing some of these air raids that maybe the Russians are thinking that. They're thinking that far ahead, that they want to go ahead and keep them honest with some ordnance over there. But that's the only thing I can think is if you bring air assets and you station there in the west, and then Ukrainian pilots can offer some sort of air support out of western Ukrainian airfields. And right now, I don't know if Odessa is, I haven't heard anything from Odessa. They're right on the border of Moldova, but I haven't heard anything if they're operational down there, if they have any assets. That's a large city as well, or if they've come under attack. I mean, here's the thing: the intel is so specious. The propaganda is off the tilt. You don't know what's right, what's wrong. You have to kind of discern a little bit in your head from these news assets. So you can only determine from what you can. Of course, you're never going to have 100% of the information constantly. So you got to make that decision or come up with your own conclusions. But don't jump to one side, especially when you're looking at it from a tactical perspective, right? Okay, sidebar. If this is such an imminent threat for Kiev, why is I know Zelensky wants to put every man, woman, and child with a weapon or whatever. But if it was me, you get all the men, you get all the non-adults, women, children, elderly, and get them the hell out of Kiev. Should have done that Ricky Tick yesterday. All able-bodied men, stay in there, and let's actually fight these guys. Are you going to build I don't know what their current state of assets are, but if you want to do a guerrilla warfare, I've heard that talked about by from some veterans that want to go over there and conduct guerrilla operations over there. And why not do it now? Let's suck them in, suck the Russians in, and shut them down. But first you need to get all those women and children and the elderly out. It doesn't look like it doesn't seem from the videos that I've seen that the Ukrainians around Kiev have the assets to go toe-to-toe on the battlefield right now. I don't know why they're not doing well, I know they have the capability. I know the separatists do. So I was like, well, I know the Ukrainians have that capability of running IED and complex ambushes. I know if you allow them to go into the city and then really, you could drag this out if you wanted to, and you got to use your enemy's strength, or I call using their enemy's strengths, or it'd be their weaknesses against them. So they have all this armor that's out there in this flat land space, and pretty much operating with impunity. Besides the fact that some of their logistics lines are kind of waning, and it takes a little bit. When you're running op like this, it's going so far. It takes a little bit for your logistics to kind of catch up if you're going too fast, if you're not ready for that kind of thing. But what is the Ukrainians' next play? I was like, get everybody out that you can, keep the men and get the women, children, elderly out of the city. They should have done that. Ricky Tick yesterday, get them at least to Lviv, like towards Lviv, in the or somewhere where it's semi-safe, out off the front lines. Allow the men and whatever you're releasing prisoners, allow able-bodied men to operate inside the city. And why they're just cutting off the city, now's the time where you set your traps, where you set your ambushes, or whatever the case may be. If there's any kind of leadership there, suck them in. Go ahead and suck them in. I know it sucks because there's going to be infrastructure casualties or infrastructure damage. But at this point, you're not beating them on the battlefield. And at this point, do we have do we have this air support? I don't know, because a lot of this stuff, intel is, like I said, specious at best. If you could have some air assets that could be running on these logistics lines and these convoys, they can be cutting them off. They can be, you don't even have to necessarily win those battles. You just cause a little disruption, right? Maybe you can go over there and do what you can, drop a few bombs, do something to disrupt their movements, to get them, keep them honest, to disrupt their plans. It doesn't seem like that is necessarily happening. So to me, in my mind, is like, well, I think the air war might be done unless the West helps them out from the western part of Ukraine. Because I'm not hearing anything about these air battles besides the propaganda, and I'm not hearing about running air ops and actually hitting logistics lines or hitting frontline Russians. So to me, that's telling me that Ukrainian Air Force is either not doing so well, or they're not exist anymore. They were taken out in the initial airfield strikes. Like I said, there's a lot of intel that's running around from different various sources that is vastly different. So you don't really know. I can only see what I can only discern what I can see from what I see from the actually verified sources or corroborated sources. So if it was me, let them come in, suck them into that battlefield. They're in armor and whatnot. What is one of the weaknesses of armor and stuff? That is operating in an urban environment. We've learned this. So if anything, we can give the Ukrainians that kind of advice if we want them to. Now we get on the geopolitical spectrum or scale. Both sides are Ukrainian government's super corrupt, right? I think we've known that from the Bidens. But I'm talking about how to win the battle for them, underdog. I'm talking about trying to save the people, because I don't, these politicians, who cares, right? At this moment, I don't want anybody to die, but what the hell's going on? You got to learn what Putin's motivations are, right? You got to learn about what his end state is, what his mindset is, and he's not somebody said something about a deranged lunatic to me. They're asking me my opinion or something. They were texting me. I was like, don't mistake his boldness and action for being crazy, right? Never underestimate your enemy like that and calling him crazy. You must understand his train of thought, and that's so we know what he wants, and we can operate on that. Because right now he is operating, like I said, I've referred to the OODA loop. He's the one acting, and we are reacting, and that's usually not a good situation. It just isn't, right? I mean, I can tell you what I would do if I was the West, and I believe some other people have said this, that prior military guys. I would have, addressed Putin if I was Biden, but we have feckless leaders. They don't know what they're doing. In fact, I know Biden's little response about the nuclear threat was just unfounded. Like, does he get any intel briefs? Does he know their nuclear capabilities? I mean, there's various means of nuclear strikes, whether it be the hypersonic missiles we hear about, but tactical nukes, staged dirty bombs, there's all kinds of stuff. And then not to mention that their ability to project power, and like I've mentioned this before a number of years ago when they're talking about Russian agents within various countries that were there. They call them kill teams, but they were operatives of some sort that are operating within these Western nations. I don't know if those are still operational, but I've heard of those, and I've seen something that would lend credibility to those units operating in the West or in various countries. It could be other countries too, not just the West. But what was I going to say? Oh, if it was me and I would have addressed him from early on this, I would have the first move into the Donbass and that I would have told him this is. Be very deliberate about it. My move is going to be moving carrier groups strategically in places, moving air assets and certain light infantry units in special forces in certain Eastern European regions. And I would move a number of carrier groups because you don't want to just have one. I would move MEUs into certain strategic locations as well. I would make it explicit that these assets, I wouldn't tell them where they're going to move. They're going to move in the region within the capability of striking certain assets, certain strategic assets. That's exactly what I said. They're going to be there, and this is our intent, is not to be in a battle. We don't want to be dragged into a war. We don't want this. We want peace. But we are going to be ready, and we will be willing to do what we need to do to solidify whatever kind of peace we need, through strength and a show of strength. I don't know what's going on. Of course, I've always talked about the second, third order effects of this from a strategic level, Taiwan, and then also some other small countries over there in the Baltics and surrounding Ukraine. But we'll see what happens as we're 20 minutes into this thing. I want to keep it done. This is like the longest ones I've done. I could go on for a long time. I didn't even get into economics because of sanctions. And then what's going on in our own markets. We have the State of the Union tonight. Oil's over $100 a barrel solidly. This, like I said, this is giving cover to the Fed too to not raise, the 50 basis points that was on the table. This seems to be like where they get a quarter point hike at best, if not staying flat, just to see what happens. This is like a wet dream for the Fed to get out of this, or try to get out of this, while still impoverishing us. Because everything we think we're doing to Russia, which there's a bunch of hypocrisy and irony. Might do something else on that. 21 minutes. Seems to be that we're doing it to ourselves at home. So if it's good for them in a war, if that's how we're fighting them, then why are we doing it to our own citizens in our own country? Anyway, talk to you later. Peace.